I wasn't supposed to be back until Sunday. That was the plan. That was the email I sent. That was the alibi my entire neighborhood unknowingly relied on. The conference in Denver wrapped early, though, one of those rare miracles where a panel actually finishes ahead of schedule instead of spiraling into ego-driven Q and amp, marathons. And instead of booking another sterile hotel night with beige walls and overpriced room service, I thought, why not drive straight to my lake house? My place. My reset button. See, this cabin isn't some Airbnb experiment or vacation rental hustle. It's mine. I bought that stretch of shoreline 5 years ago after selling my tech startup, cedar beams, stone fireplace, floor-to-ceiling windows facing Blackwater Lake, the kind of silence that makes you hear your own heartbeat. It's where I go when the world feels loud. It's where I remember who I am. And I didn't tell a soul I was coming. Not my neighbors. Not the HOA. Especially not the HOA. That part matters. It was close to dusk when I turned onto the gravel road, tires crunching slow, pine trees arching overhead like they were guarding something sacred. I remember smiling to myself, thinking about lighting a fire, pouring bourbon, sitting on the dock with nothing but water and sky, and maybe a bald eagle doing its patriotic thing in the distance. Then I saw the porch light on. Now, I don't leave porch lights on. I'm obsessive about that stuff. Lights off, thermostat low, security cameras armed. I even double-checked the deadbolt like a paranoid dad in a horror movie. So when I stepped onto the porch and heard movement inside, my stomach did this weird drop, like I'd missed a step in the dark. I pulled out my key anyway, because what else are you going to do at your own house? I slid the key toward the lock, and the door swung open from the inside. Just opened, and there she was. A woman I had never seen in my life, mid-40s maybe, oversized cardigan, hair in a messy bun, holding one of my ceramic coffee mugs like it was a courtroom exhibit. She froze. I froze. For a split second, we were just two humans staring at each other, both trying to figure out who was about to call the cops. Behind her, I could see everything. My throw blanket on the couch, my boots by the fireplace moved out of place, my kitchen counters wiped but clearly used. There was a casserole dish on the stove. A casserole. In my house. She blinked first. Can I help you? I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was so insane my brain didn't know where else to go. Yeah, I said, slow and calm. You can start by telling me what you're doing in my house. Her face drained of color so fast I thought she might faint. Elliot said this place was vacant. Elliot. And right on cue, like she'd been waiting behind a curtain for her dramatic entrance, I heard heels clicking on the wooden steps. Fast. Sharp. Purposeful. Officer. That's him. I turned, and there she was. Except her name isn't Elliot anymore. Let's call her Monica Crane, president of the Blackwater Shores Homeowners Association, self-appointed queen of shoreline morality. Binder always in hand, smile always tight. Behind her, red and blue lights flickered against the trees. A patrol SUV idling at the end of the driveway. She pointed at me like I'd just crawled out of the woods. That's the intruder I told you about. He broke in while my friend was inside. I was afraid for her safety. I just stood there, holding my car keys, staring at the woman who had once fined me $150 for having excessively rustic dock furniture. Two deputies stepped out. They weren't aggressive, just tired. You could tell they'd rather be anywhere else. One of them adjusted his vest and said, "Sir, we received a call about a potential break-in. Can you identify yourself?" I reached into my back pocket slowly, handed over my license. Name's Nolan Pierce. This property belongs to me. Monica scoffed, loud enough for the trees to hear. He doesn't even live here full-time. I ignored her and walked inside, straight to the entry table where I keep a waterproof folder with my deed, tax records, and survey map. Because yes, I'm that guy. Prepared. I handed the paperwork over. The cabin, the land, and the eastern shoreline down to that old oak tree are mine. Purchased outright. No shared community designation. The deputy scanned the documents. His partner walked a slow circle around the living room, taking in the casserole situation. Monica shoved her friend forward. "Tell them what I told you." The woman swallowed. Monica said the house was empty, that it wasn't being used, that the HOA had rights to reassign and used properties temporarily. There it was. Monica lifted her binder like it was scripture. According to our bylaws, the association can ensure properties serve the community's best interest. I folded my arms. Show me the line where that overrides a county-recorded deed. She opened the binder, flipped pages dramatically, found nothing, closed it. The deputy looked up at her, flat and unimpressed. Ma'am, this deed clearly lists Mr. Pierce as sole owner. This is not community property. Monica's jaw tightened. He's never here. Families in this neighborhood need housing. And there it was, the real motive. Not charity. Control. Optics. Power. She didn't like that I was independent, that I didn't attend HOA meetings, that I paid my dues but never bowed. My cabin represented something she couldn't regulate, and that drove her crazy. I looked at the woman in my kitchen again. She didn't look malicious. She looked embarrassed. Manipulated. You were told it was vacant? I asked gently. She nodded. Monica said you were some investor who abandoned it. Investor. Abandoned. That's how easy it is to rewrite someone's story when they're not around to defend it. The deputy handed my papers back. Sir, would you like to press charges for unlawful entry? Monica inhaled sharply, and I realized this wasn't just about my house anymore. It was about boundaries, about someone deciding that absence equals forfeiture, about the audacity to call the police on the actual owner and try to flip reality upside down. I took a breath and looked around my own living room. The firewood stacked wrong, my books shifted, the faint smell of someone else's perfume in the air. And that's when I understood. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a takeover attempt wrapped in HOA paperwork. All right, let me pause the story for a second, because this is where things get interesting, and not just in a drama kind of way. This is where people get themselves into real trouble. According to standard procedure, when someone calls in a break-in, officers show up assuming the caller might be the victim. That's just how it works. They separate people, verify ID, check documentation, and stabilize the situation. They're not there to referee neighborhood politics. They're there to determine lawful possession. And lawful possession almost always starts with one thing: whose name is on the deed. From a legal perspective, HOA authority has limits. A homeowners association can enforce community standards, collect dues, fine you for painting your mailbox neon green if the bylaws say so, but they cannot reassign, occupy, or repurpose a privately deeded property just because they think it's underutilized. That's not governance. That's trespass. And here's the deeper layer. This is a psychological trap. When someone positions themselves as a community protector, they start believing their authority is moral, not contractual. Monica didn't see herself as stealing my house. She saw herself as correcting an imbalance. In her mind, my absence created an opportunity. The moment you accept that logic, property rights stop meaning anything. The lesson here is simple but brutal. Just because someone speaks with confidence and carries a binder doesn't mean they carry the law. Now, back to the living room. So we're standing there in my living room, the air thick, the lake dead quiet outside like it's waiting to see how this plays out. The deputies are calm, professional, but you can tell they've shifted. The energy has shifted. This isn't a break-in anymore. This is a false report sitting on a porch in designer heels. Monica crosses her arms, chin high, still performing. This property has been in used for months. The community has discussed it extensively. I tilt my head. Discussed it? Yes, she snaps, flipping her binder open again like she's about to summon a legal spell. We have families doubling up in homes. We have community strain. And you have a luxury cabin sitting empty. There it is again, the narrative. Not criminal. Noble. I take a step closer, not aggressive, just steady. Empty doesn't mean available. Not living here full-time doesn't mean forfeited. You don't get to redistribute something because you don't like how often I use it. The woman, let's call her Diane, is standing by the kitchen island now, clutching that coffee mug like it's the only stable thing in the room. She looks at Monica, then at me, then at the deputies. Her confidence is dissolving in real time. One of the deputies clears his throat. Ma'am, he says to Monica, tone sharper now. Did you verify ownership before advising your friend she could stay here? Monica hesitates, and that hesitation is louder than anything she said all night. I assume. He cuts her off. Assumptions don't override county records. You can almost hear the click in the room. That moment when someone realizes the performance is over and the consequences are real. Diane finally speaks, voice shaking. Monica told me the association had authority over vacant homes. She said Mr. Pierce was some out-of-state investor who didn't care about the property. I let out a short laugh, not amused, just tired. I live 30 minutes away. I was here 2 weeks ago. Monica turns on Diane now, defensive. You needed a place. I was helping you. No. She was positioning herself. That's the difference. The deputy looks at me again. Sir, at this point you have grounds for unlawful entry and potentially filing a complaint for false reporting. False reporting. That lands heavy. Because calling the police on someone you know is the rightful owner? That's not just messy. That's dangerous. I look at Diane. She doesn't look like a criminal. She looks like someone who trusted the loudest voice in the room. I'm not pressing charges against her. I say, nodding toward Diane. She leaves tonight. No damage, no return. We're done. Diane exhales like she's been underwater. I'm so sorry, she whispers. Monica, on the other hand, stiffens. You can't intimidate residents like this. I blink at her. Intimidate. You show up unannounced, make threats, involve law enforcement. One of the deputies actually chuckles under his breath. Ma'am, you involved law enforcement. Silence. I step toward the fireplace, pick up one of my logs that's been stacked incorrectly, set it back the right way. It's a small act, but it grounds me. This is my house. My air. My floorboards. Here's what's going to happen. I say, voice even. Diane gathers her things and leaves peacefully. I'll give her an hour. After that, she's trespassing. As for you. I turn to Monica. This ends now. She squares her shoulders. The HOA has rights. And there it is, the delusion one last time. No, I say quietly. The HOA has bylaws. And bylaws don't outrank deeds. The deputy nods. Ma'am, if you continue to interfere with this property or file knowingly false reports, you could be cited or arrested. That's the first time I see it. Fear flicker across her face. Not outrage. Not superiority. Fear. Because authority only feels safe when it goes unchallenged. Diane disappears down the hallway to pack. I hear drawers opening, suitcase wheels bumping against hardwood. The deputies step outside to give space but remain visible, a silent reminder that reality has weight. Monica lingers near the doorway. You could have just let her stay, she mutters. It wouldn't have hurt you. That line tells you everything. I walk closer, not confrontational, just firm. It would have hurt the principal. And once you surrender the principal, you don't get it back. She doesn't respond. She just clutches that binder tighter, like it's the only thing holding her together. 45 minutes later, Diane wheels a suitcase onto the porch. She won't meet my eyes. I don't blame her. Getting manipulated into squatting in someone's house isn't exactly a resume booster. I truly believed her, she says softly. I know, I reply. Next time, verify. She nods and walks toward Monica's SUV. Monica doesn't open the passenger door immediately. There's tension even between them now. Alliances built on shaky foundations rarely survive exposure. Before getting into her car, Monica turns back to me. This isn't over. I almost smile. Actually, it is. Because earlier that year, after one too many aggressive HOA letters about dock aesthetics and shrub symmetry, I had quietly hired an attorney to review the association's governing documents. And what we found was interesting. Their jurisdiction technically stopped at the paved road. My shoreline parcel, though paying voluntary dues for amenities, was never legally absorbed into full HOA control. She didn't know that. I'll be filing a formal notice, I add calmly, revoking any implied access rights and pursuing a restraining order if necessary. You and any representative of the association are to remain 100 yards from this property unless invited. The deputy, who's been listening from the steps, gives a small approving nod. Monica's face shifts from red to pale. You can't isolate yourself from the community. I'm not isolating, I say. I'm defining boundaries. And that's when it hits her. She gambled. She assumed I'd cave, apologize, maybe even quietly let Diane stay to avoid conflict. Instead, she exposed the limits of her power in front of law enforcement and one of her own allies. She gets into the SUV without another word. The engine starts. Gravel crunches. Red taillights fade down the pine-lined road. The patrol vehicle lingers a moment longer. One of the deputies steps up to me. You handled that well, he says. Not everyone does. I just wanted my house back, I reply. He gives a half smile. That's usually how these stories start. When they finally pull away, the silence returns. Real silence. Not tense silence. Lake silence. The kind that feels earned. I step back inside and close the door. The air smells faintly of unfamiliar detergent. There's a casserole dish on the stove that I did not authorize. My couch cushions are slightly dented, but it's still mine. I walk to the window overlooking the dock. The moon's reflecting on the water, calm, indifferent to neighborhood politics. And I think about how close it came, how easy it would have been for the narrative to stick if I hadn't shown up early, if I hadn't kept my documents handy, if I'd let embarrassment override action. Squatting doesn't always look like a stranger kicking in your door. Sometimes it looks like a neighbor with a clipboard convincing everyone she's helping. I pick up the casserole dish, carry it to the trash, and let it drop with a hollow clatter. This house isn't a community project. It isn't a moral debate. It isn't a symbol of redistribution. It's my property. And tonight, that line held. So here's the part nobody likes to talk about. The quiet part after the sirens leave, after the adrenaline drains, after you're standing alone in your own living room wondering how something so absurd almost became normal. Because that's the real danger. Not the stranger in your kitchen. Not even the HOA president with a superiority complex. The danger is normalization. The slow drift of, well, maybe it's not a big deal. The lesson here is boundaries don't erode all at once. They erode in conversations, in meetings you skip, in assumptions you let slide, in the idea that someone else's confidence must equal legitimacy. From a legal perspective, ownership is boring on paper and explosive in practice. A deed isn't flashy. It's not emotional. It doesn't make speeches about fairness. It just sits there in county records, quiet and powerful. But the moment someone decides moral opinion outranks documented ownership, you're not in a housing discussion anymore. You're in a power struggle. And here's the psychological layer most people miss. This is a psychological trap. When someone frames control as compassion, resistance starts to look selfish. Monica truly believed she was the hero of that story. She told herself she was solving a housing strain. She convinced Diane she was protecting her. She convinced the deputies she was reporting a threat. When people self-assign moral superiority, they stop checking their authority. That's when things get dangerous. The lesson here is not, HOAs are evil. Some are fine. Some keep neighborhoods functional. But the structure itself creates temptation. Small jurisdictions, volunteer boards, limited oversight. Give someone a binder and a little bit of power, and watch how quickly guidelines start feeling like governance. According to standard procedure, police respond to whoever calls first. According to human nature, communities often believe whoever speaks loudest. If I had arrived flustered, angry, without documentation, if I'd matched Monica's emotional volume, that night could have tilted differently. Not legally, but socially. And social pressure can push people into bad decisions. So here's what I want you to think about. Do you actually know the scope of your HOA's authority? Have you read the governing documents? Do you know where their jurisdiction ends and your deed begins? Or are you operating on vibes and neighborhood gossip? Because I promise you this, the bylaws are not the Constitution. They are contracts. And contracts have limits. Also, verify everything. If you're ever offered housing, access, or temporary permission to use someone else's property, confirm it with the recorded owner. Diane's mistake wasn't malice. It was assumption. An assumption nearly gave her a criminal record. And for the homeowners watching, keep copies of your documents accessible, not buried in a filing cabinet in another state, not locked in a storage unit. Accessible. Calm wins arguments when paperwork backs it up. But beyond the legal side, here's the deeper takeaway. Absence does not equal abandonment. Just because you don't see someone using something every day doesn't mean it's yours to reassign. That logic doesn't stop at cabins. It creeps into businesses, relationships, community leadership. They're not around enough. They're not contributing the way I think they should. That mindset gives people permission to redraw boundaries that aren't theirs to redraw. And once that becomes acceptable, you don't just lose property lines. You lose trust. I keep thinking about what Monica said. It wouldn't have hurt you. Maybe financially, no? I could afford the inconvenience. But principles aren't measured in square footage. They're measured in precedent. The moment you allow someone to override your rights because you can handle it, you teach them they can do it again. To you. Or to someone less prepared. So yeah, I cleaned the house. I reset the fireplace. I changed the locks even though technically I didn't need to. Not out of fear, out of clarity. Boundaries are strongest when they're visible. Now I'm curious what you think. Have you ever dealt with an HOA that overstepped? Have you seen situations where community authority blurred into personal control? Do you think Monica genuinely believed she was helping, or was it always about power? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read them. And if you've got your own story, especially one where legal lines and social pressure collided, share it. These conversations matter because most people don't realize how thin that line can be until they're standing in their own doorway being called the intruder. And if nothing else, let this be your reminder tonight. Check your documents, understand your contracts, and don't let someone with a clipboard convince you that your name on a deed is just a suggestion. Because it's not.